One of the things that I'm seeing some folks who, while I have you both here, they will have a fit if I do not ask this question. I'm already seeing some of the tweets. Dr. Hotez, can you talk with us a bit about two things, actually? Number one, long COVID, right? And what we know about it and what we should be thinking about in terms of how we prepare to deal with that. But number two, there is this, when Dr. June Francis was on, she was saying that some of the folks in Caribbean island nations, for example, they were receiving vaccines that we were not the same vaccines that we were getting here in the United States. And one of the concerns from some of the Jamaican nationals was, listen, these aren't the vaccines that they're getting in the US. How come we're getting these other vaccines? Have you encountered any of the folks who have been the recipients of your vaccine, the Corbavax? I hope I'm saying that correctly. Has there been any of that similar questioning about why it is that Americans largely weren't taking this particular vaccine? And are there concerns that also speak to whether or not by getting access to this vaccine that is vegan, halal compliant, and that was made with the intentionality of being low cost? Have you seen any concerns about whether or not there is a perception that it is an inferior vaccine? And could you speak to both of those?
Yeah, absolutely. So actually, the emails that I'm getting, and Dr. Batazzi, my science partner, has been getting is more like, "Hey doc, there's no way I'm taking that mRNA vaccine. When can we get your vaccine? Because it's vegan, because it's a technology that people are already familiar with. They've already vaccinated their kids with it, and unfortunately, we do not have any path for the U.S. right now, because we were kicked out of the Operation Warp Speed funding because we're not a pharma company. Wow. And we don't have a U.S. partner because they basically see the markets kind of flooded already with vaccine in the U.S. And so there's not really so far a lot of interest. So in some ways it's working the other way. And by the way, I always have to remind them, get your mRNA vaccine. It's a good vaccine and it'll save your life. And that's so. I once said to somebody, I feel like I don't know if you remember that movie, A Miracle on 34th Street, that Christmas movie. Yes. And Kris Kringle is sitting there in Macy's department store. I think people can also get a good deal at Gimbel's, and I feel right. I feel like, if you know what I'm talking about, I feel like I do that a lot too. So
you're supposed to be, promoting Macy's, but hey, did you know that there's a place you can get this product better over somewhere else? But I think that also speaks to your heart, which to me is an important element in developing the trust factor. So
we do not talk enough about this because, even if it turns out that the Omicron turns out to be the last gasp of COVID-19 in America, I don't think it will be. I think other variants are coming. But let's say, for argument's sake, that it is. You know what? This is just the beginning. Because think of the millions of people now who are having long-term COVID effects, respiratory insufficiency, thrombotic complications, cardiovascular insufficiency, exercise intolerance. And the one that worries me the most is, the Oxford Neurology Group came out with a very important preprint on medRxiv showing gray matter brain degeneration and an MRI picture that looked like the cognitive decline you'd see among much older individuals. Wow. And they could do that because, they have a real health system, unlike the US. So their national health system has this thing called the biobank, and the biobank had 40,000 MRIs, pre-pandemic, so that anybody who got COVID during the pandemic in the UK could get re-MRI'd. And so you could do a direct before and after. And it's pretty chilling, that paper, because so I think, we're going to be in for, and we kind of ignore those individuals because they're not necessarily going into the hospital or ICUs, right. but they're suffering severe impairments, and then people don't take them seriously also, because physically they look okay, but they're truly suffering, and now we're learning about some of the mechanisms responsible for it. And that too is fascinating, the role of autoantibodies and microglial cell activation. I think this is also going to give us a window into other chronic persistent consequences after an infection, like chronic fatigue syndrome or fibromyalgia. I think this is going to open the door to really understanding all of that, and hopefully we'll come up with some new therapies. But when I see this on social media, whenever people talk about COVID, those who are suffering long COVID, and this is not a rare condition. This is incredibly common.
Right.
Are all saying, "Hey, don't ignore us. We're still suffering," and they're absolutely right.